Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
Hi, and welcome back to the Prime Life podcast, where every time we explore the ideas, innovations, and people shaping the future of longevity. If you're interested in the future of living longer, living better, longevity, innovation, and building solutions that truly meet people where they are, this is the episode you won't want to miss. Hello, today we're having a wonderful guest on. His name is John Coyle. John has a fascinating area of expertise called chronoconception, which is the study of time perception. Hold on to your hats, hold on to your seats. You will not be the same after you listen to this episode. So I don't want to bore you with too many introductions for John. He's going to tell you his own story, his own way. He is the quintessential storyteller, among other things. John, welcome to the Prime Life podcast. Please tell our audience a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to dive right into the questions.
Hey, Mary, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad we found each other. I love your tagline. And so I think we will dig into all things time and making it count. A little bit about me. Grew up in Michigan, normal kid. Got into bicycling and speed skating at a young age because, it's cold and hot there. And eventually parlayed that into going to the World Championships in both sports and eventually an Olympic silver medal. So that's my sporting history. From a work and education standpoint, I was fortunate enough to get into Stanford, so I went because, I got in, which would never happen these days. But and I got my graduate degree from Kellogg, and along the way, I went into consulting and big business, corporate American business. But I now found myself as a peripatetic raconteur, which is a very, very fancy way of saying I am a traveling storyteller. So we'll get into all that, I'm sure.
Well, I love how you just described that. And I have no idea where you came up with that phrase, but I do love it. But again, you are the storyteller. So your motto is around making time count. And I know when you and I connected, because we say that on Prime Life, like, it's your time, make it count. Yet it seems summers that used to last forever when you were kids are now more fleeting. What is going on? I find myself too, I'm like, is something wrong with me? It seems so different. Is it because I'm getting older, or what's going on? But I know you can explain it.
Yeah. Last summer had the same number of seconds, 8,884,000, as a summer during COVID, as a summer when you're 8. But 98% of adults feel that time accelerates the older we get. It's pretty universal across cultures, languages. And, when I first started investigating this and talked to some pretty heady experts, including Dr. Phil Zimbardo at Stanford, when I asked him, why is this happening? His answer was, well, nobody's done that research. So I'm happy to share that my obsession with this notion for the last 15 years will be part of the outcome of this talk. But I will tell you, I'll back up and tell you how the obsession really started. In sports, particularly my sports, cycling and speed skating, hundreds of seconds usually determine first from second, gold from silver, gold from bronze, gold from no medal at all. And so, this notion that your future trajectory can hinge on just a few seconds or milliseconds in these cases, that's all obviously true in sports. But the insight that occurred to me as I moved out of sports was, oh, wait, Mary, it's true in real life. Like, you said yes or you didn't. You got off at the exit or you didn't. You avoided the car crash or you didn't. You took the promotion across town or you didn't. She said yes or she didn't, right? Like, so all of these pivotal moments tend to actually happen in moments. And the Greeks figured this out ages ago. We modern people, we labor under this misconception that time is linear when we know that it's not the way we experience it, right? It speeds up, it slows down. The Greeks had 2 words for time. We only have one. It's the most common word in the English language, by the way. We overuse it. They had kairos and chronos. Chronos is clock time, the way we tend to use it, planes, trains, and automobiles. But kairos is really insightful. It's human time. The way we actually experience time, the modern definition would be chronoception, the way we perceive time passing. And the deeper meaning is when everything happens at once and the trajectory is reset. And the etymology comes from the archer releasing the arrow. sometimes in life, we are dealt moments or design moments where the trajectory fundamentally changes literally in seconds. And so that's really what I've been studying and been fascinated with for the last 15 plus years.
What does that mean for us everyday humans in terms of as we want to live with greater purpose as we get older, as we want to perhaps change some of the behaviors that we don't like? I mean, you shared a story with me before we hit record a couple days ago about some of the incredibly wealthy individuals that you speak to. And they're very successful financially. They have 4 homes that they maybe don't go to. They've achieved everything financially, but they're struggling with how they can use their time differently. They just can't seem to get that or make those decisions differently. So can you talk a little bit about the human behavior and also as it connects to design thinking, which I'm fascinated with?
But design thinking, which you're very familiar with, is just ultimately asking and answering better questions, framing the problem right. And I think that most modern Western successful people have framed their question about time completely inaccurately. It's like, how can I make more time, or how can I manage my time? Not recognizing the one, and I'll give you 8 laws that govern this, but the first law of time perception, of chronoception, is the way we experience time is not linear. So you can't just expect to put in 30 of this and get 30 of that out. Like, that's not the way it works. It's a non-linear framework that is based on the way the brain constructs time. Second thought here is that the brain constructs time out of memories, that memories are the currency of time. So more memories equals more time. If we can accept those two things, we can start to think about, all right, what kinds of moments do we need to design back into our life that maybe were there when we were 8,
right,
that have been lost now? So can I give you a metaphor and a quick story?
I would love one.
So the first metaphor for the way that the brain processes time is the metaphor of a fixed flow of water through a garden hose. Mm-hmm. So if you go to the side of the house, you turn on the garden hose, fixed flow of water, the flow of water won't change. You put your thumb over it, the water speeds up. If you put a constrictive valve on it, the smaller that aperture, the speed of the water goes up in squares. So this is what I think a great metaphor of what our brains are doing to time. The flow of time in our brains is being constricted the older we get. And let's use our metaphor and use for the aperture of this hose end, breadth of experience, uniqueness, and depth of experience, emotional intensity. And so for 8-year-olds, well, I mean, it's first time to the beach, first time seeing snow, first ball game, first crush, first win, first loss, first heartbreak, right? Like, everything is exciting, new, scary, fun, terrifying, wonderful, awful. And, their aperture for time is wide open on the x-axis in terms of uniqueness and wide open in terms of emotional range. And so their aperture for time is wide open. Time trickles through, summers last forever. Okay, now you're 20-something. You don't want to cry a lot. So you choose not to do things that made you cry when you were younger or couldn't choose them. And, your aperture in terms of uniqueness isn't going to be as unique. You've had a good deal of life experience. And so your aperture for time starts to attenuate and time speeds up. This is when most people start to feel it. And then you get to, middle age, and I'm sure it's not true for any of your audience, but for a lot of my clients in the corporate world, at least, they go to the same job with the same commute to the same location, the same coworkers, the same places for lunch. They do the exact same thing every day. They go to the same places on vacation. And with the gauze of Advil, Paxil, air conditioning, everything is safe, comfortable, routine. Their aperture for time is shrunk down to this. And a summer as an 8-year-old starts to feel like a decade. And I've had clients even say, I don't remember the 2000s. So how do we work this law in our favor? We need to expand the breadth and depth of our experiences. And a lot of people sort of get this in their 30s. They're like, I'm gonna do a triathlon. I'm gonna take up singing lessons. I'm gonna take a night class. I'm gonna go to Toastmasters. Those are okay. They're nominally correct. They expand the breadth of your experience some. But most of the time, there's not a lot of inherent risk.
Right.
And so there's just not that same level of emotional intensity. So how do we put this in our favor? You have to actually take on activities that you care enough to cry about. Mm-hmm. If you're not so emotionally invested, well, then you're not going to expand time. Can I give you a quick story?
Yes, please. As you're speaking, I'm thinking I need to hear more to make sense.
So when life gives you choices, this is another of the laws I'm going to give you. Choose the one that makes the best story. Not the hardest, not the easiest, just the one that's going to make the story. I was walking up a mountain. I was telling this variant of this, what was going to be a TEDx talk a number of years ago with a friend of mine. And as I got to this part, she's like, oh no, you're going to make me do it. I'm like, what? It's like, I got invited to sing at a festival in front of 20,000 people in 6 weeks. And I said, no, because I haven't sang in years and I don't think I can be ready. I'm like, oh, you have to do it. You have to do it. Call them now. So I made her get on her phone right there on the mountain. She called them. She's like looking at me, rolling her eyes. She's like, yeah, okay, I guess I'm going to do it. So she's like, puts it on her phone, slumps her shoulders. She's like, I'm going to kill you. So she calls me 4 weeks later in tears. I can't believe you made me do this. I'm going to be a disaster. I don't think my voice is where it's going to be. I only have 2 more weeks to prepare. And then she called me 2 weeks later in tears and said, John, today was the best day of my adult life.
Oh.
I killed it. We got a standing ovation. And she said, the last 6 weeks were the longest 6 weeks of my adult life. So when you put in the risk for the reward, you're going to get the returns. But if you take everything safe, comfortable, and routine all the time, that is the death of time. So that's the first law.
Well, I'm going to tell you this, and you and I chatted. My personal background is about taking a lot of chances and a lot of risks.
Yes.
But as I've gotten older, I've almost gone a little bit backwards because I'm taking some of those experiences that maybe didn't turn out exactly the way I had anticipated, was willing to do the work. You could do all the right things and have everything go wrong, and do all the wrong things and have everything go right. Now, you may or may not agree with that. That said, keep going.
Well, I mean, I think you have such a great eclectic background, and I think you've definitely lived a few lifetimes, which is sort of the goal here, right? Right. If life is accelerating for most people, the older they get, well, that's not okay, right? We want returns from our time investments. We'll get there, but
Exactly.
we don't want to be putting more and more investments into our time bank and having them give us less and less. Like,
Yes.
that's not fair. No, that's not okay. Nobody should be okay with it. The second law around chronoception is the one that everybody gets wrong. And it's really hard to sometimes get your arms around it. But the reality is our brain, your brain, my brain, we're sweeping short-term memory to long-term memory about every 2 to 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sort of living in this 2 to 3 second weird present window, but we're really 0.3 of a second behind because it takes that long for a thing to process. So we're actually always in the past. And so we're sweeping these memories every 2 to 3 seconds. And it turns out most times in life, a lot of the most important things happen in those 2 to 3 seconds. Like, it's the way we're designed, programmed. And so this notion that a lot of people labor under, that how I experience time in the now, there's a lot of talk about the now, is my experience with time. I would argue it's not at all. It doesn't actually matter. I will make the argument that it doesn't matter how you experience time in the now. It only matters what you remember. So, for example, you had this job where you had to type these really long series of numbers, letters, and digits into the green screen of a computer for 10 hours on every Saturday in a little cubicle. Well, that was my job in college. I had to type the new periodical codes for Stanford's periodicals into the green screen of their computer every Saturday. That was my Canvas job. I would sit in that little cube, and the clock would go click, tick, just stop. Like, those days felt endless in the present. But in memory, there's nothing to remember. Everything I know about my job at Stanford's Green Library, you now know. Right. There's nothing to be stored there. Conversely, the first day of vacation is sort of the opposite. It feels fast in the present, but in memory, it expands. So you go into the office, you're going to do a half day, you get in at 7, you're working through your task list. The clock is spinning on the wall behind you, like, oh my God, I got to go. So you take the Uber to the airport, you get off and you go to the beach and you have a walk, you see the sunset, you have a nice dinner, you have a cocktail, maybe see the green flash, maybe it's a late night swim. The whole day is sort of gone pretty quickly, but in memory, it's the inverse. The metaphor here is long, tedious, boring routine days are like a surveillance camera. It's a slow frame rate, it's grainy, black and white, and you can store an entire week in a gigabyte. The first day vacation is sort of the opposite. Your mental hard drive is an 8K camera. Like, your mental hard drive is trying to gather all this data. It's taking in so much, it feels fast in the present, but in memory, it inverts. It's lights, color, action, zoom in, zoom out. You store so much data on the first day of vacation because it is usually very unique. It usually has some elements of risk to it. Am I going to get there? Am I going to find it? And it has, but I'll get you all 6 elements in a bit, but it has a lot of the arbingers that the brain is trained to write down. So the second law, to put it in your favor, is you have to choose, like I mentioned, choose the things that make the best story. Not the funnest, not the easiest, not the hardest necessarily, just the one that makes the best story. I'll give you a quick example and then you can examine. Here's an example. I'm going to give advice to your audience that nobody's going to like, and yourself as well. Design fear and suffering into your vacations. Okay, well, I'll give you the example and then I'll say why. So I got invited 8 years ago to speak in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. They flew my daughter and myself first class, picked us up in an Escalade, took us to a hotel that had its own pool. We did not need to leave that room. It had a mini bar that was fully stocked. We could have had cocktails, kiddie cocktails, sat in our little pool, watched the sunset. And I said, hey, you want to walk to town? And she's sort of on to me. And she's like, how far is that? And I said, well, I think it's a little over an hour. And she said, oh, okay. So we start walking along the beach. It's beautiful. Blue-green water. We saw manta rays, some starfish. An hour, a little over our end. She's like, are we almost there? And I said, I think so. And then about an hour, 45 minutes in, the sun does that thing it does in the tropics. It just dumps down in the water, disappears because there's no twilight. And she's looking at me. I'm looking at her. I'm like, well, I hope I'm almost there. And then the sand turns to coral. So we're stumbling in our flip-flops over broken coral. Our feet are bleeding. She's crying. There's a bunch of guys with bonfires over there. We don't want to do that. We're 2.5 hours to go back. We don't want to do that. So we go another half hour. And another full out 4 hours later, we stumble into Fifth Avenue in Playa del Carmen, starving, thirsty, tired, frustrated, feet bleeding. And she looked at me and she said, this is going to be the best dinner of my life. And it could have been a hot dog. It wouldn't have mattered. We sit down at this little corner restaurant, Argentinian place. We order our steaks for dinner. We ordered our appetizer. It comes. It was a goat cheese stuffed squid with a light white wine lemon butter sauce with a twig of parsley on top. It was 8 years ago, and I can see it and smell it now. Yeah. Point being, human brains are wired for stories. And if you know anything about the classic storytelling, which I know you do, all stories have a plot. All plots have a crisis. If you don't have a crisis, you don't have a plot. You don't have a plot. You don't have a story. If you don't have a story, you won't remember it. Therefore, you must design fear and suffering in vacations. It's just basic logic.
So how do you teach others to really do that? To really do what you just said? Because it sounds great. You're a great storyteller, and I'm at the edge of my seat thinking, oh no, bleeding feet and all that time. And I'm, an exerciser and I'm used to walking, but I think I would have been, where are we? But for some individuals, they would pause and say, yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah. And, people's comfortability with risk is different, but the whole point is the brain. So when it comes to memory writing, the hippocampus is the memory writer, right? It's about every 2 to 3 seconds, as we mentioned. Sitting next to it is the amygdala, and the amygdala is a sentinel, and it does a lot of things. But when it comes to memory writing, it's looking for 2 things only. Never do that again.
Right.
Please don't die. Always do that again. Please procreate. And so when it wakes up for those 2 things, which come in a variety of flavors, it doesn't have to be a near-death experience, but something exciting, scary, or something lovely and romantic, or family love bonding. Any of those 2 will tend to create more memories than other types of activity. It wakes up and it tells the brain, write faster. So instead of writing every 2 to 3 seconds, your brain writes memories 20 to 30 times per second, which is an increase in frame rate of 50 to 60x. When you've ever been in a really scary or intense situation and time seemed to slow down, which they always do in movies,
yes,
it's because the amygdala does this. So your frame rate goes up, which means time slows down. So that's how you know when the amygdala is involved. And 8-year-olds have wide awake amygdalas like 24. But as adults, we try to routine our way away from anything that is not safe, reliable, secure, predictable, and that is the death of time. If you ever found yourself in the parking garage and you don't know how you got there, I would argue you weren't actually alive. The brain didn't write it down. It just said nothing new here.
Yeah.
So when I work with high net worth individuals and families, they know where their money is, right? They don't have all their money under their mattress or in cash.
Right.
They don't have it all in bonds. We're talking about X is time horizon, and then risk, right? And they don't have it all in crypto, short-term, high-risk investments.
Right.
A lot of it's in stocks, longer-term, higher risk, some in cash, some in bonds, etc. They have a diverse portfolio of where they invest their financial investments. Time investments are very similar. You cannot get high returns from low-risk, short-term investments of time. You can't. You can't do it.
Well, I love that. And I love that you talked about the financial piece because, Nassau Financial Group, we talk about living longer, living better, but we talk about longevity risk and we talk about having portfolios that are diverse and playing the long game, not the short game, and not reacting quickly all the time to the market volatility and things like that. So I loved that analogy because I think it really makes sense. But there's that risk piece, right? Because like you said earlier, and I actually had a guest on Prime Life podcast, and she said she has done a lot of different things, and she has said that she has a much higher tolerance for risk than most people. She actually said that because she has put herself out there. She's done a lot of different things with her career. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. How has your experience with speed skating and all the training you did, and you had some ups and downs, how has that impacted the work that you're currently doing?
Well, short track speed skating is a high risk, high speed sport. But it's very time expansive. I can remember certain races to the nth detail. And so as I was doing the work on, what helps the brain write, store, and recall memories, all three are important. Did I write it down? If you got to the parking garage, it probably didn't. Can you find it? A lot of memories can be lost without a good hypnotherapist. You might never find them. And then third, is highly recallable. And it turns out there's 6 key drivers, and we've talked about a couple of them. Risk and uncertainty wakes up the amygdala. If you think of your memories as a stack of photos that also have emotion, sights, and sound in it, etc., there's this big stack that is the you that you are. You are the sum of your memories. Now, so risk and uncertainty are going to wake up the amygdala. It's going to put those photos at the top. Uniqueness, very similar, different but similar. You can have risk and uncertainty every day if you have a dangerous job, but it's not unique. So uniqueness being a second flavor. A third flavor is emotional intensity. When you're in the amygdala state, that writes memories faster and deeper. When you're in the unique state, it creates novel memories. When you're in an emotionally aroused state, dopamine is released, which causes those to be encoded, and think of it as more paint or more ink on the photo. And then you have physical intensity, which is probably the least important, but it does help. It releases a bunch of different things in your endocrine system. And then beauty. Trauma also works, just to be fair. We're going to remember, don't do that, always do that. Let's vote for the always do that things.
Right.
And then the last is the flow state. So if you're in the flow state, when you're in that brainwave state, you recall 4 to 5 times more data than when you're not in that state. You combine that with the amygdala-driven, unique and uncertain moments, and you've got a recipe for storing 300 times more data per second than when you're not. Now, all that aside, you don't want to live at the edge all the time, which, is another adage that's true. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone, right? There's some truth to that, especially when it comes to memory creation. So what I try to teach my clients to do is design some of these moments a few times a year. You don't want to live at the edge all the time, but every once in a while, you want to do something for your family, for yourself, for your team, for your sponsor, for your whoever, that's going to be unique and different and leave a lasting memory. Because if you're first recall, you become first call in business. I can give you an example if you'd like.
Yeah, I would love that. And then I have something else that I need to ask you, but go ahead.
So a client of mine, this is a couple of years ago now, he heard my talk. And he was living in Australia, and his son was about to turn 12. He's like, I'm going to do something. I don't know what. And so he actually emailed me. It's in my blog, but he wrote me the story that I'm sharing with you now, that when his son was going to turn 12, they lived in Australia, but his son had been a fan of a British soccer club, football club, since he was 5, because it was his dad's team. So dad wore the jerseys, he wore the jerseys, watched this for 7 years, never been out of Australia, never been to London, never been to a football match. So dad, for his 12th birthday, says, we're going somewhere, you'll find out when we get there. So surprise and delight, right? Uniqueness, some risk. So they get on a plane, and he's like, wait, we're going to London, Dad? He's like, yeah. And he's like, what are we doing there? You'll see. So they fly to London, and then they get off the plane, and they take the Uber to the stadium. And at the stadium, he's like, okay, now I know why we're here, right? Like, and Dad's like, not really. So they don't pull around front. They go around back of the stadium. The entire team files out, holds up a jersey. His son is the mascot for the game. He goes into the stadium with them, sits with them, warms up on the field with them. They all sign his jersey afterwards. Dad can't tell the story without crying. Time and money are fungible. You should be trading your time for money, of course. But once you're successful with the financial aspect, it becomes time. How do I invest my time, my money for the greatest returns of time. And that's what I help my clients do. Time capital is how I refer to that.
I'm thinking of Ted Lasso for some reason.
Yes.
Because I absolutely love that series. Actually, over my desk, I have Leave because I just love that. Every time I think of it, it just kind of like makes me smile because I love positivity and I love when individuals are able to make something happen, even those things that maybe are challenging or they need to really push through something to get to that. So I love that story you shared with that gentleman and his 12-year-old son. What is time capital? I know you've talked a little bit about it. Let's talk a little bit about that and how we invest in it as we get near the end of our conversation.
Time capital is a notion that just as our second most valuable currency is financial currency, money, our number one most valuable currency is time. And I believe that the currency of time is memory. So if you can accept that, then how do we write, store, and recall more memories? And that's where you start to think about this investment portfolio of, okay, how much linear clock time, chronos time, the Greeks would say, is it going to take to get returns from this particular time investment? And how much risk is there associated with this type of time investment? And for a lot of people, even though they're willing to take some financial risks for higher returns, they live under the misconception that they can have low risk, short-term investments of time and high returns. And it just won't and doesn't work that way. I mean, you might get lucky once in a while, but by and large, you've got to sort of put yourself out there to get these time returns, because otherwise the brain is going to be like, oh, nothing new to write here. Nothing scary, nothing exciting, nothing unique, nothing beautiful. It's just the same old, same old. And so routine is the death of time investments. And so helping my clients take some risks. I'll give you an egregious example of what I've done to clients, and then you can sort of work backwards from there. These are not the things I would do with a family office, for example, but
go for it. Love to hear this.
12 EO guys, they're all in their late 30s. And I'm like, all right, I can do whatever I want with them. So pick them up in a box van, no windows. They just sit in the back on the floor in their luggage. They have no idea where they're going. They have no idea what's going to happen the entire day. I drive them for 45 minutes. I might have drove a little ragged here and there just to spice things up a little bit, sliding around in the back. And they're wondering what they signed up for. And then we get to these woods in the outskirts of Asheville. And I just lurched the van over to the side, got out and ran away. It took them 16 minutes to get out of that dang van. I was getting nervous. I was watching with binoculars. Eventually they figured out they should get out. And they followed the chalk lines that I had left behind. They had to tramp through some woods, through a stream. They got their feet wet. It was cold. It was a freezing day. Up this hill, over the top of the hill, back down the hill, 2.3 miles later, scratching their heads the whole way. They go down to this alcove where there's a grotto with two ladies holding towels and robes and glasses of champagne because there's a hot springs right there. And so we took them through it all, right? Risk and uncertainty, uniqueness, emotional intensity, physical intensity, beauty, and then the flow state. And we got them all there in just, a couple of hours time. And I assure you, it was a very memorable excursion for them. So that's the kind of stuff I do.
That's a great story too. I'm sure you have a bunch of them. We'll have to have you on again, but you talked about the flow state and I understand what it is. And is that part of your goal? I guess I'm going to ask you, what was their response after they got there with the towels and the champagne? Like, what are some of the comments that you heard?
It's sort of like, this is a biophysical thing. The release of pain is actually joy. Like
okay.
Physically, like if you put a rubber strap on your arm and really make it painful and then release it, you actually emit dopamine and serotonin, the joy chemicals. The release from the uncertainty of tramping around without not really knowing what was happening to, this is orchestrated, led to like this just really like release of stress. Like they were so fully immersed into just hanging out with each other and swapping stories in the pools about other experiences that they'd had. It was really amazing to watch them really bond, because people bond over shared experiences. And so that's what we created.
John, on the Prime Life podcast, we ask all of our guests one final question, and that is, You're very accomplished. I mean, my goodness, you won a silver medal at the Olympics in speed skating, and you've done a lot of cool things. Let's face it. You could wake up every day and do whatever you want. Why do you do what you do?
In order to answer that, may I tell you a story, Mary?
Of course. What's
I'll
the
tell you
best
what.
way?
It's the only reason where I'm here, and my trajectory was reset by an individual 20 years ago and about 2 weeks. And I was at the Olympics, so I'll explain. I went to the Olympics the first time and I won a silver medal. And that sounds good probably to you and your audience, but in my head, I was a first loser. So I've got to train 4 more years to get a gold medal because that's why we're there, right? So I trained 4 more years, and unfortunately, I ended up not making the US team, and I became a one-timer first loser. I stomped off the ice after the last race of not making the team, destroyed my skates, knowing I would never skate again, walked across the concrete, got in my car, took off my skates in the car, drove 45 hours from Lake Placid, New York to Phoenix, Arizona, crying my eyes out the whole way, knowing I had to start all over from scratch at age 30 with no experience, no job, and it was hard. And I managed, I went into consulting, etc. But 8 years later, I got a call from NBC, would you be our analyst for the next Olympics? No, I couldn't say no to that. So there I am back at the Olympics, warmly welcome back. And everybody knew who I was, and I knew most of them. But still, in my head, I'm a one-timer first loser. Until the 16th night of the 17 days of the Winter Olympics, where my job was to interview the parents, coaches, and skaters. So I got to know everybody. On the last night before the gold medal round for my event, which is always the last night of the Olympics, I'm sitting at dinner with one of the parents, and he looked at me suddenly. He said, "John, I need to tell you something." And he looked anxious and nervous. So he was making me anxious and nervous. I'm like, what did I do? So we walk away from the table, and he's like, "I just wanted you to hear this. John, we wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for you." And I said, "I don't know what you mean." He said, "You probably won't remember, but 12 years ago, after you won your silver medal, you brought it to a little reception in Bay City, Michigan. I brought my son, Alex. He was 11 years old at the time. You signed an autograph. You put your medal around his neck. The next day, he joined the Bay City Speed Skating Club, and tomorrow, he's skating in the gold medal final." And just like that, my entire world changed. It's the only reason I'm here right now. Up till then, I didn't watch it. I didn't talk about it. Now this is all I do for a living is talk about it and other things. And so, Al gave me in that moment such a life-changing, time-altering, time-stopping Kairos moment that it has fundamentally created a different opportunity for me going forward. And now I speak for a living, and that's why I do what I do, to help other people give that same gift of time.
I love that. And I always say there's no such thing as a coincidence. So, John, it was great having you. But before we go, what's the best way if an individual wants to get in touch with you?
Easy. I'm johnkcoyle.com. Simple as that. COYLE. Blogs are there, books are there. I have 2 books, working on the 3rd book, the time book. Videos, everything you could ever want is there, as well as booking me to speak, because that's what I do for a living.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that 3rd book. We talked about it again, our previous conversation, some of the ideas. So you'll have to keep us posted, and we'll have to have you on again. And thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure, Mary. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.